We're going to start with a new chapter, and that is the living world. Now, this chapter is the basics of biology, and it is from the unit of diversity in living organisms in the living world. So, the living world. The first thing is we're going to understand the basic salient features of the living organisms. So, the basic features, for example, if someone asks you to define a living organism, what would you say? You might say growth, reproduction, metabolism, or consciousness, or whatever. We will take a look at all those things one by one, and we'll see if they are the defining properties or not of a living organism. The first one is growth. Growth. So growth, to define growth is the increase, it's the increase in the size of the organism, the cells, increase in the size, cells, and weight of an organism. So increase in size, cells, and weight of an organism. That is basically what we call as growth. So size, or we can say mass. So weight, size, cells, and mass of an organism. We don't exactly say weight, but mass of an organism. This is what is growth. So the basic definition of growth in a living organism is it's the increase in size, cells, and mass of a living organism. Now, growth, like there are some non-living organisms as well which grow. For example, mountains. Mountains do grow. As the time goes on, the mountains, they become bigger and bigger, but they're non-living things. That means they're not living. There are also some other things like boulders, sand mounds, and there are loads of examples, but we can say from this conclusion we can tell that non-living things do grow. Not all non-living things grow, but some of them. So non-living things such as mountains, boulders, and sand mounds. These are all non-living things, but they do grow. So they grow. Now from this conclusion we can tell that growth is not a defining property of a living organism. So growth is not a defining property of living organisms. So what is exactly defining property of a living organism? Defining property is something that distinguishes living organisms from other non-living things. So growth is not a defining property because there are some non-living things like mountains, boulders, and sand mounds which do grow. So they are non-living things, but they grow. So we can say that growth is not a defining property of living organisms. The second thing, this is what we talked about, growth. Second, we'll talk about consciousness. Consciousness, or the response to stimuli. What exactly is consciousness? Consciousness is being aware of the surroundings. Being aware of the surroundings and the external environment. Being aware of the surroundings. Now, any non-living object like let's say a ball or whatever non-living object it is, non-living things they're not aware of their surroundings. They don't know what's happening around them because they don't have brain and they can't sense it, so they don't respond to stimulus like that, external stimulus. So from this we can conclude that consciousness is a defining property. Now the third thing we'll talk about, so here we talked about consciousness. The third thing we'll talk about is called as reproduction. Reproduction. Now reproduction is giving birth. So reproduction is the giving birth to the offsprings. So giving birth to younger ones of the same species. So what do I mean by same species is, for example, humans can't give birth to tigers or dogs or lions or whatever. Humans can give birth to humans itself. So giving birth to the same species or the same offsprings. Offspring is actually the younger one. Now reproduction is not a defining property. Now why reproduction is not a defining property? There are some living organisms that do not reproduce, like infertile human couples or mules, and loads of living organisms which do not reproduce. So we'll write mules. So mule is basically the male donkey and a female horse. So we'll write it here. It's actually male donkey and female horse. So it's a mix of male donkey and female horse. Male donkey and female horse gave birth to what we call as mules. So mules and some infertile human couples. So infertile humans, they do not give birth or reproduce. They do not reproduce. So by this we can tell that reproduction is not a defining property. Not a defining property. So here we took a look at growth, consciousness, reproduction. There's one more, the fourth one. This one we'll write it here. So the fourth one, that is metabolism. This is very simple to understand. Metabolism, to define metabolism is a sum total of all the chemical reactions. So it is sum total of chemical reactions. So it's a sum total of all the chemical reactions in a human body. Now we know that metabolism can't occur in non-living things. So metabolism is a defining property of living organisms. So it's a defining property of living organisms. So here we took a look at all the 4 salient features of living organisms: growth, consciousness or response to stimuli, reproduction and metabolism. Next we'll take a look at nomenclature, which is the most important part of this chapter. So now let's learn about nomenclature. Now we learn about nomenclature in chemistry as well. We also learn it in biology. In chemistry it's called as IUPAC nomenclature, but in biology we call it as binomial nomenclature. So basically in science, nomenclature is actually, in biology, nomenclature is actually the scientific naming of living organisms. So scientific or giving names. So scientific names. It's giving scientific names to living organisms. Now, these scientific names, there are some rules as well for nomenclature. We'll talk about those. The first rule, so the rules for nomenclature, the first rule is the scientific name of a living organism should consist of two words. Two words. And that's why we call it as binomial nomenclature. And these two words are actually, the first one is what we call as generic name, and specific epithet. So generic name and specific epithet. So two words. The first word is generic name, the normal generic name. Next one is a species name or the specific epithet. So this is binomial nomenclature, and this was given by a scientist, very famous scientist called Carolus Linnaeus. That's the first rule of nomenclature. The second rule of nomenclature is that the scientific name should be in Latin language. Latin language is also referred to as dead language, and the reason it's called dead language is there are no native speakers of Latin, but we do use it in science. In some scientific names we do use it, so that's why it's called as dead language. And all the scientific names to living organisms are in Latin. They come from origin of Latin language. The third rule for nomenclature is that if the name is typed out, so when you type it in a computer or laptop, it needs to be typed in italics. Typed out in italics. So we shouldn't type it in like other fonts or something like that, but we just need to type it out in italics, because that needs to be highlighted, or that needs to be specific. So that's why it's typed out in italics. And when you write it with your hand, so when it's handwritten, it needs to be separate. It needs to be underlined separately. Underlined separately. So for example, I take one scientific name, that is Mangifera indica. And this is the scientific name for mango. When I write it out, when I write it with my hand, I should underline it separately. So Mangifera indica. You shouldn't do like this. It's not a proper way of writing this scientific name. Instead, you just need to do it like this. It needs to be underlined separately. This is just an example. So this is the one of the rule for nomenclature. Now the fourth one is that the genus, so this is the genus, needs to be in capital letter. And species needs to be in small letter. I think I wrote it in capital letter, the species as well, but it needs to be in small letter. So again, let's take that same example. Mangifera indica, capital M. Mangifera indica, when it comes to indica, I needs to be in small letter. So it's going to be like this, and we need to underline it separately. This is how you write mango scientific name in following the rules of nomenclature. And the fifth rule, this is not found in all textbooks, but this is also one of the rule of nomenclature, and that is the scientific word should have more than 3 alphabets. 3 alphabets. And less than 20 alphabets. So So it needs to be more than 3 alphabets and less than 20 alphabets. So that's the limit of the scientific name, the letters, the number of letters in the scientific name. So these are some of the rules that we need to follow when we come to nomenclature, giving scientific names to living organisms, plants and animals, every living organism. So it's a binomial nomenclature, and this is how, these are some of the rules of nomenclature. The next thing, one more thing we'll talk about is that in some of the animals, the scientific name, the genus and the species, genus and the species are the same. So when genus and species are the same, when the genus and the species are the same, then this particular scientific name is called as tautonyms. This is the term that we give to when genus and species are the same, tautonyms. And tautonyms are accepted in animals, but they're not accepted in plants. So this is one more thing. This is about tautonyms. Now we'll talk about taxonomy. So taxonomy, and taxonomy is also given by Carolus Linnaeus. So what exactly is taxonomy? Taxonomy is like a branch of science which deals with identification, nomenclature and classification of organisms. So we can write it down like this: identification, so identification means identifying the organism. Nomenclature is naming the organism, and classifying the organism, classification. So identification, nomenclature, classification, these are the 3 steps that we need to follow while doing the taxonomy. You need to identify the animal. Identifying means you need to like find out the characteristics of the animal. Like for example, we talk about animals, is it unicellular, multicellular? If it's multicellular, like different characteristics of the animal. Here we're talking about animal, but plants also, it applies same to the plants. You just need to identify the characteristics in that organism. Nomenclature is when you name the organism based on, because you know the genus and the species, and if you combine both of them, you'll get the scientific name. Classification, so we took an example of Mangifera indica. Mangifera is actually the generic name, and indica is actually the specific epithet. So next you need to classify the organism. So classify into different categories, and we give a name to that particular category, which is called as taxon. Taxon, or taxon, or taxa. Taxa is plural and taxon is the singular one. Now this taxon is actually the category. So this is the level or the category of the classification, and taxonomy is actually given by Carolus Linnaeus, but the term taxonomy was given by Candolle. Term, this is just a term given by Candolle, but the the whole concept of taxonomy is given by Carolus Linnaeus. Now next we'll talk about systemics, which is another important term to know. Systemics. Now systemics is very simple. Systemics is actually, what we can say, it is systemic arrangement. So it's basically an orderly arrangement of living organisms based on evolutionary relationships. So it's the arrangement of living organisms based on the evolutionary relationships. That is what we call as systemics. It's a systemic orderly arrangement of the living organisms based on their evolutionary relationships. And systemics is also given by Linnaeus. So Carolus Linnaeus, he's called as the father of taxonomy, and the nomenclature, taxonomy, systemics, these are all given by Carolus Linnaeus. So we'll write it down here. Carolus Linnaeus, and Carolus Linnaeus is called as father of taxonomy. So all these nomenclature, taxonomy, systemics, all of these terms, all of these concepts were given by Carolus Linnaeus, who is called as the father of taxonomy. So we talked about nomenclature, taxonomy and systemics. And we also talked about taxon or taxa. Each taxonomic category is called as taxon. Each taxonomic category is called as taxon, and plural of them is called as taxa. Now, the next we are going to understand the taxonomic hierarchy, which is also very important. So, taxonomic taxonomic hierarchy. Taxonomic hierarchy is basically the classifying or giving the levels. It's a giving levels of the taxon. Now, to understand taxonomic hierarchy, this is basically a systemic orderly arrangement of all the taxa. To understand this, we'll draw like a little triangle to understand all the taxon. So we'll divide it into different sections. Now, to remember all the levels, we'll use a little mnemonic, and it is kids prefer candy on fresh green salad. Kids prefer candy on fresh green salad. So, kids prefer candy on fresh green salad. Kids, K stands for kingdom. So, we'll write it down, kingdom. P stands for phylum or phyla. In plants, it's called divisions. Candy, C stands for class. On, O stands for order. Fresh, F stands for family. G in green stands for genus. And then S in salad stands for species. This is what our triangle looks like on taxonomic hierarchy. This is the triangle of taxonomic hierarchy. So kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus and species. Now kingdom is the largest taxonomic hierarchy. So kingdom is actually the biggest, what we can say, it's the biggest group in all these taxa. So kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus and species. Species are actually the smallest. Kingdom actually has the biggest number of organisms in that particular taxon. So this is what is called as taxonomic hierarchy triangle. And we also learnt about the mnemonic that can help us remember all these taxon, all these levels. Kids prefer candy on fresh green salad. And kingdom, as we said, it is the largest and the most diverse group. And species is the smallest group, and they are very closely related animals. First, let's talk about species. So we'll just do a little mind map kind of thing to understand this. Species. Species are the smallest group and they are the most closely related species. Closely related. They are the most closely related species, and species they can interbreed with each other. That interbreed with the same species. Now, the actual term of species was given by John Ray. So, term John Ray, and the biological concept of species was given by Ernest Mayr. So if you have studied the chapter of biological classification, you know that Ernest Mayr is the same person who has discovered the phylum, the kingdom Protista. So Ernest Mayr was the person who discovered kingdom Protista, and he also gave the biological concept of species. So this is about species. So again, they are the closely related organisms which can interbreed in nature and they produce fertile offsprings. So we can write that as well. Fertile offsprings. That means fertile is something that can reproduce. So the offsprings can also reproduce. So that's how species are, the characteristics of species. And the biological concept was given by Ernest Mayr. Term was given by John Ray. But in this particular thing, there are some exceptions like mule. So mule is actually a male donkey and a female horse which cannot reproduce. There is one more called hinny. Hinny is actually male horse and a female donkey. So we'll write it down. Mule is a male donkey and female horse. Hinny is female donkey or we can write male horse and female donkey. So these are some of the exceptions of this concept, that is closely related species that interbreed with and they produce fertile offsprings, we told. But these are some of the organisms which are infertile, so they don't reproduce the offsprings. There are two more. Tigon, which is the combination of tiger and lioness. Lioness is the female version of lion. There is one more called Lygon, which is actually lion and tigress. So some of the examples that can't reproduce in nature. So this is species. Next, let's talk about genus. Genus is actually a group of genus is group of species. It's a group of the closely related species. So they are a group of the similar species. We can take some examples. Panthera tigris, Panthera leo, Panthera pardus. So Panthera tigris is actually tiger, Panthera leo is lion, and Panthera pardus is actually leopard. Now these three of them has the same genus, that is same generic name, that is Panthera, Panthera, Panthera. So in Panthera leo there is Panthera, in Panthera tigris there is Panthera, in Panthera pardus there is also Panthera in it. So Panthera is the same genus in this scientific names. So Panthera becomes the genus in here. We can take one more example, that is Solanum tuberosum, which is potato. Solanum nigrum, which is actually black nightshade, and Solanum melagina, which is aubergine, eggplant or brinjal. So these three of them has the same genus, that is Solanum, Solanum, Solanum. Solanum tuberosum, Solanum nigrum, Solanum melagina, which is actually aubergine, eggplant or brinjal. So these three has the same genus, that is Solanum. So it's actually a group of species. The next one is family. Family, as the name suggests, it is a group of similar genus. So it is a group of similar genera, which is the plural of genus. Here also we can take one example. Panthera, which is the genus that we talked in this case, and Felis. So Panthera, Felis. Felis includes cats. So Panthera, Felis, and Panthera and Felis. So Panthera is actually tiger family. That's what we can say. Felis is actually cat family, and so Panthera and Felis, when these both of them come under one family called Felidae. So we can actually write it down. So Panthera, Leo, Panthera, Leo, Panthera tigris, Panthera pardus, and there is one more genre that we can take example as Felis. Felis it includes cats. So Panthera and Felis come under a family called Felidae, and Felidae obviously includes cats. Felidae, it has cats in there, all cats, like it's a cat family, so that's why we call it as a family. So cat family includes obviously cats, kittens, tigers, lions, and many other things that come under cat family, Felidae family. This is what family is. Next, let's talk about order. Order is the assemblage of similar families. So assemblage of families. We can take example here as well. So order, it's the assemblage of similar families. Example, Felidae. Felidae is one family. Canidae is another family, and Felidae and Canidae come under an order called Carnivora. So we'll write it down. Felidae has cats. Canidae has dogs, and these both give rise to a family called, or an order called, Carnivora. So Felidae has cats, Canidae has dogs, and these both give rise to an order called as Carnivora. And Carnivora, this is the order that we get when there is Felidae and Canidae. It's the assemblage of similar families. Next, there is class. Class is a group of orders, group of similar orders. So that's a class. We can take example as well. In class, there are similar orders. Example is Carnivora, which is an order. Here we talked about that. And Primata. Carnivora, Primata, these both give rise to a very diverse kind of class called Mammalia. Mammalia has loads of different animals. So obviously it consists of mammals, so like human beings, from human beings to all cats, dogs, and elephants, and all different, mostly all different animals that we find around us. They come under Mammalia. So even reptiles, amphibians, birds, and all those different animals come under the class Mammalia. So it has Carnivora and Primata. These are just some examples. We are not only talking about animals, but we can talk about plants as well. So class. Next is phylum. Phylum are a group of class, different classes. Group of different classes. We can take examples. As I said before, Mammalia, aves, which are actually birds. Reptilia consists of reptiles, and Amphibia, which consists of amphibians. These all give rise to a very famous class, a very famous phylum called as Chordata. Chordata. So let's write it down. Aves, Mammalia, Amphibia, Reptilia. These four of them, give rise to a phylum called as Chordata. Very diverse, a very diverse phylum of animal kingdom. Kingdom. It is the most diverse level of all these taxonomic hierarchies. So kingdom it's actually a group of phylum. We can take example. Phylums like Chordata, Porifera, Cnidaria, Ctenophora, that is Coelenterata, Cnidaria, Ctenophora, Platyhelminthes, Annelida, Echinodermata, Arthropoda, Nematoda, and other mollusca. So all these different phylum, they come under a diverse kingdom called as, here, that is animal kingdom. Not only animal kingdom, there are other kingdoms, like there is kingdom Plantae, which has plants, kingdom Fungi, which has fungus, kingdom Protista, which consists of unicellular nucleated ones. Nucleated means eukaryotic, so unicellular eukaryotic organisms. There is another kingdom called as kingdom Monera, which is which consists of ancient bacteria. It consists of unicellular prokaryotes. Unicellular prokaryotes are the ones which do not have nucleus, they have a nucleoid. So this all we'll talk about in biological classification, but for now we're talking about this particular triangle, which helps us understand the different taxa, so species, genus, family, order, class, phylum, and kingdom. And this is the way it goes. So we'll just write it down like this. So it's going from species, genus, family, order, class, phylum to kingdom. So here we're talking about the taxonomic hierarchy. Now is the most interesting part of this chapter, that is taxonomical aids. So we'll talk about taxonomic aids. Now taxonomic aids are basically nothing but the aids that help us understand the living organisms much more better. The first taxonomic aid that we'll talk about is called as botanical gardens. Botanical gardens. Now botanical gardens, we have learnt about these in our primary classes as well. We know what a botanical garden looks like. Botanical garden is actually a place where plants are kept. So it's a place where variety of plants are grown. variety of plants grown. And this botanical gardens, the reason why botanical gardens are present is for scientific study. There are loads of reasons, but this is the main reason for scientific study of those plants, much more better. It is for recreation, so for fun as well, to educate people, and so we told about recreation, that is for fun as well, and it's just very relaxing to just visit all botanical gardens, so it promotes relaxation as well. So these are various reasons why botanical gardens are present. It's a place where a variety of plants are grown, and it is for scientific study mostly, and as well as for fun and recreation. Now we'll talk about one very famous botanical garden in India, and it's called the Indian Botanical Garden. And this is the old name that is there for this particular botanical garden. So the Indian Botanical Garden, it is the old name. It's the old name, but there is a new name which is called as Acharya Jagdish Chandra Bose Botanical Garden. Jagdish Chandra Bose Botanical Garden, and it's a new name. Now there are loads of plants in here. It's very famous botanical garden, and we'll talk about some of the features of this particular botanical garden. Now this botanical garden has, and it, by the way, it's located in Howrah, which is in Kolkata. This particular botanical garden is famous for the great banyan tree. The great banyan tree. We know that the national tree of India is the banyan tree, so that's why there are loads of these in India. So in this particular botanical garden, there is one banyan tree which is called as the great banyan tree, and this particular banyan tree the age is 250 years old. So that's a lot of time. So it's 250 years old. It's very old, and the square meters it covers is 14,500 square meters. So it's very big, it's very huge banyan tree. So it gives shade to this much square meters, that is 14,500 square meters, and there are 2,800 prop roots. So prop roots are actually aerial roots which we can see from above as well. It's above the ground as well, so that's why it's aerial. 2,800 prop roots. So this is the great banyan tree. The next feature of this particular botanical garden is Victoria Amazonica. Victoria Amazonica. And this Victoria Amazonica is actually a water lily, and it's commonly called as the giant water lily. Giant water lily. And the length of this water lily is 2.3 meters. 2.3 meters. So it's very big. 2.3 meters. If you count it with your hand, it comes from here to maybe here. So it's very large, and this particular one, that is giant water lily, that is Victoria Amazonica, which is the scientific name, it is 2.3 meters. That's why it's called as giant water lily. The next one is Pandanus. And Pandanus, the special feature in this particular tree is that it has multiple root caps. Now whenever you see a root, you get reminded of the root cap, which is also called as calyptra, and we only see one root cap. But in case of Pandanus, there are multiple root caps, and there are stilt roots. Stilt roots. So as you can see in the picture here, the stilt roots, they are visible from, they're above the ground as well. So it has aerial roots, that is stilt roots, like this in a triangle manner, in this kind of fashion. These roots are present, that is Pandanus. So botanical garden, we talked about the great banyan tree, Victoria amazonica, Pandanus. Now we'll talk about the second taxonomic aid. Second taxonomic aid, which is known as zoological park. Now zoological parks, commonly known as zoos, children love to visit zoos. They are for fun, they are very fun, so for recreation, but most importantly they are for scientific study, for educating people. And zoological park is a place where animals are kept, some endangered species. Endangered species are the species that go extinct, that can go extinct. So these kind of different animals, wild animals especially, are kept in zoos, like in their enclosed, it's an enclosed area. So they are for fun, recreation, they are for scientific study as well. So if you have been to a zoo recently, then you know that whenever you see a particular animal, let's say a tiger or a sea lion or whatever it is, you see beside that particular thing, you see like a board which tells you all the information about that particular animal, and they're mostly for scientific study, to educate people. So these are some reasons why zoological parks are present. Now zoological park is an enclosed area where animals are kept. Here we'll take some examples. That is, we have the Dublin Zoo. So it has many animals like sea lions, tigers and lions, and flamingos, different birds, some goats, and many species, many animals are kept in this kind of zoos. There is one more called San Diego Zoo and Lincoln Park Zoo, which is in Chicago. So these are some zoos that are present all around the world. The third taxonomic aid that we'll talk about is the museums. Now museums are here we're talking about science museums. We're not talking about history museums, like there is one in Dublin and there is one in Galway as well. So Dublin Museum and Galway Museum, some of them are history museums, but we're not talking about history museums, we're talking about science museums. And in science museum is a place where animals and plants are kept. So both animals and plants. Animals and plants are kept there, and you can see insects, skeletons, fossils, various things like these. So insects, skeletons, fossils. So fossils are like the traces of the ancient animals and plants. Skeletons of different different animals as well. Like when you see dinosaurs, so when you go to a science museum, you can see the exact skeleton of the dinosaur and many other animals. There are insect boxes as well. Not only animals, there are also plants which are kept in museums. So science museums. So one example is National History Museum in London. There's one in Natural Museum of Natural History. So National Museum of Natural History, which is in Delhi. And there are some in there are all around the world, these museums are present. Now the fourth taxonomic aid is called as herbarium. This is also very nice one. So herbarium is like it's a collection of dried, pressed and preserved and mounted plants. So what you do in a herbarium is, it's just like a piece of card and it has specific measurements as well. So we'll write it down. I think it is 29 by 43, 29 by 43 centimeters of card. So there is one material which where these plants are kept inside. They're mounted, they're pressed, dried and mounted. So 21 by 43 card is there. So they're pressed, mounted and dried plants. So how this herbarium looks like is that there is like a card of this kind of measurement. Now this varies in different locations of the world, but this is the approximate card that we take, and on that plants are kept inside. So we'll do it here for a little illustration. So the plant is kept here, not the whole plant, obviously not, just some parts of the plant, like some of the leaves, some flowers or whatever it is. This is how. But here in the bottom of this particular thing, there is what we call as description box. So there is description box below, description box, and description box should include the local name. Local name is the name that you the name of the plant that you call in your native language. There is scientific name of the plant. There is the name of the collector who collected the plant, the date when it is collected. You must include the date as well. You should include the location where this particular plant is mostly found, or where did you get it from. You can also include the family of the plant. It belongs to the family it belongs to. So these are some things that you can include in the description box, which is very important. This is the most important thing in herbarium that you need to know. Now the fifth one is also a very interesting one, interesting taxonomic aid. And that's called as key. Now key is actually a set of alternate statements, and there are two statements and they're called as couplet, and each statement is called as let. So we'll take an example for this. So first we'll write it down. Two statements, alternate statements called as couplet, and one statement is, each statement, you can write it down like that, called as lead or let. So we'll take an example. For example, only one cell, so we have to write it down because the numbers are also very important. Only one cell or only unicellular, or multicellular, Second, we'll write it down as nucleus present, or nucleus absent. There's no nucleus in it, that means it's a prokaryote. Third, we'll write it down as autotrophic, or heterotrophic. And we'll write down as the fourth as motile or non-motile or mobile. Now, what exactly am I writing here? I'm writing the couplets. So this is a couplet first couplet, second couplet, third couplet, fourth couplet. Each sentence in the couplet is called as a lead. So I'm going to tell if is it unicellular or multicellular. I'm going to tell it is unicellular. If it's unicellular, go to number 2. I say like that. So I'll write it down. Go to number 2. If it's a multicellular, I say go to number 3. Now it's a unicellular, you go to number 2. When you go to number 2, there are again 2 options. Is the nucleus present or is it absent? If the nucleus is present, it's a eukaryote. If the nucleus is absent, it's a prokaryote. And if it's multicellular, you should go to 3. In 3, if it's autotrophic, then they're plants or belongs to kingdom Plantae. If it's heterotrophic, go to number 4. You go to number 4. And you again are asked with 2 options, motile or non-motile. Motile, if it's a motile one, then you say it is a fungus. It is an animal. It belongs to kingdom Animalia. If it's a non-motile one, you say it's fungi. Now the main function of key is to understand the characteristics of that particular animal or a plant, a living organism. So in this, we took an example of all the kingdoms that are present in the whole universe. So only unicellular, go to number 2. Here also you're asked 2 options. You need to pick one. If you pick something, you will have an answer. If the nucleus is present, it's eukaryote. If the nucleus is absent, it's a prokaryote. So this is an example of a key that is present. So in this video, we discussed about different we talked about the living world chapter, and we talked about, the first thing we talked about is the salient features of the living organisms. Then we learned about the rules for nomenclature and taxonomy, systemics. All these different concepts, biological concepts, are given by Carolus Linnaeus. And there is one more thing in systemics. When we talked about systemics, there is one book written by Carolus Linnaeus which is called as Systema Naturae, and it includes all different things that are related to this particular chapter, the living world. So that is a book written by Carolus Linnaeus, Systema Naturae. We also talked about taxonomic categories. We learned about the triangle that we did, and a little mnemonic to help us remember the categories of the levels actually. We also talked about each level in detail. Then we learned about taxonomic aids. We learned about botanical garden, zoological park, museum. We talked about the herbarium and key. So in this video we discussed about the living world chapter.